Okay. Oh my gosh, you guys. Okay. First guest expert interview today. And these interviews were inspired by the Brave Healer Book Mastermind program, which is rolling out for the very first time in 2019. And I am super happy to be with Laura Munson today. And Laura is the founder of Haven Writing Retreats. And I'm actually not reading any kind of bio, Laura. So you get to fill in the blanks in a minute, okay? But I want everybody who's watching this to know what an incredible inspiration you have been to me on my own writing journey. There's this thing that goes on in your group, and there's this couple of sentences that we have posted back and forth to each other as a result of Haven. And it was something like, you go to Haven thinking maybe that you're a writer, and you leave there knowing you are. And that is so much to do with you and the way that you support us and provide that amazing safe haven for us as a person, and then especially as a writer. So I walked away from your Haven 1 with my life changed and slightly in overwhelm, going home on the plane thinking to myself, oh my God, what am I going to do now that my whole life has changed and I'm going to have to actually step into the reality of what I really want as a writer? And that was a moment, right? And then later did Haven 2 with you, which is just for people writing their books. And again, left there with this chunk of my life feeling very changed, and the motivation and the inspiration was so real. Like, you have this way of stirring the pot in a good way and getting us to get aligned and on purpose with our writing. So again, thank you for being here. And now I'm going to let you sort of introduce yourself and fill in the blanks about what you want everybody to know about what you do and all that good stuff.
Well, that was quite an introduction. Thank you. I'm going to put these on so I can see every molecule of you. Hello.
Okay.
Well, thank you for doing this work, Laura. It's an honor to be out in the world, being of service to people who care about the written word, and then to have people pass it on like you're doing is really my ultimate goal. So deep bows to you, woman. And I'm thrilled to be here with all of these writers of books. It is a brave endeavor to write a book. I've written a lot of them. So one is published. And then I've got another book, a novel coming out in 2020, in January 2020. So I'm very excited about that. So I write nonfiction. I'm mostly known for nonfiction. I wrote a book called This Is Not the Story You Think It Is, A Season of Unlikely Happiness, and that was published in 2010, I believe. So that's a memoir. And I got to work with one of the very best editors and marketing teams in New York. So I feel like, in a way, I was sort of like a spy for writers to find out what the red carpet is like. And now this time that I'm being published by an independent press for a novel. So I'll learn a lot about that too. I also know a lot about hybrid publishing, a little bit about self-publishing. I've had a lot of Haven alums who are self-published and published with hybrids, traditional and indies. So I'm a wealth of information, and I would just love for you to pick my brain.
So the This Isn't the Story You Think It Is was the New York Times best-selling book, correct?
Yes, that happened to me.
And that happened, exactly. So I know it's corny to start with this question, but please tell us how that was for you. Because, I mean, all of us are sitting around with this dream in our heads that should be the goal. And I want you to talk about your experience and tell us the reality of it and make us understand how that was for you. Did it catapult your career like possibly you hoped it would? Tell us everything.
Oh man. Well, because I feel like this is an intimate group, I'm going to start with something that will go straight to your heart, I hope. And that is, the question is, when will it ever be enough? I mean, seriously, what is your dream? What is your wildest dream? And I believe you should dream your wildest dreams. But with that question all along, when is it ever enough? Is it a Pulitzer? Is it a National Book Award? Is it, my book was not number one on the New York Times bestseller list. Is it number one? Is it, for 2 years straight? My book was also an international bestseller. Is it an international bestseller? Does it stop with that? Does it have to be turned into a movie, an Oscar award-winning movie that you get to star in? I mean, it's like, what I try to teach and what I live by and have lived by since 1988 when I started my first novel is to truly cultivate a love for the process. It has to be about that, to love and delight in the process, even and especially when you're writing about really difficult stuff. So like if you're writing a memoir, that ain't for sissies and you're exposing yourself. So I guess to answer your question, I started writing fiction in, like I said, 1988, my senior year in college. I wasn't even a creative writing major. I was a film major. And I found writing quite by surprise through writing screenplay. And then that turned into fiction writing, and I realized that's what I really was, a writer. And I remember I was living in Boston in those days, and I completely committed to writing. And somebody said, which is uncommon, right? Like, how often are you at a party and somebody says, "Oh, you're writing a book?" And then you start to talk about it, and it's just like crickets, It's like, I've had lots of those conversations over the years. And I remember this one friend of mine saying to me, "If you could look into your future and see that you'll never be published, would you still write?" And I can remember it like it was yesterday. I didn't even bat my eye. It was just, yeah, of course I will. Because it was I'll tell you, there's lots of fancy ways to talk about writing, and anybody who tells you there are 10 easy steps, run for the hills, because there are no 10 easy steps or 5 or even 1. But I can distill the whole thing down into one thing, and it's not very elegant. But for me, it's obsession, really. I mean, I'm completely obsessed with it. Otherwise, why would you ever do this thing? So there's a huge payoff for me when I sit down to write. I never feel like it's work. And I want you and everybody I work with to feel that payoff too. So you have to cultivate a flexible writer in you so that it's not like I can only write at 10 a.m. on Tuesdays with my Mac, not my PC, in the corner cafe. And it just has to be that it happens like a little girl getting away with something. That's kind of how I look. Like I'm faking sick so I can finish reading like the Black Beauty series or something.
I love that. I love that feeling that you just gave me too, just getting me back into that little girl feeling of excitement. And I want everybody to take a pause and allow yourself that question one more time, because that question that you just asked is brilliant, and it needs to be the foundation for this book you all are writing. And would you do it anyway if you knew it wasn't ever going to be published or even ever going to be read or ever going to make $1? Or I just love that question, because if it's a yes behind it, then I think the answer ends up being it will be published, it will be read, and it might make $1,
Right.
Yeah.
I only hope. On the other side of this wall is my office, and there's a closet on the other side of this wall. And in that closet, there are 22 unpublished manuscripts. And about 2 of them are good. And the rest were exercises in learning. And each of those was probably, I would say, took maybe 9 or 10 drafts and maybe 3 years of my life. I can't do math, so sometimes I would bust one out in a year. But it's fiction that I've been working on all these years. And then again, wouldn't you know, I'm known as a memoirist. And the short version, the way that I'm actually more known than that book, is the short version of it, which I wrote after I finished the book. And it was published in the Modern Love column of the New York Times Sunday Styles section. And I was told that the responses to that little essay temporarily shut down the New York Times website. I mean, it went viral. And, it's like, if I could do that again, I would. And in fact, I wrote that essay in 1 hour after my agent said she wasn't even going to send that book out because I didn't have a platform. And she was sick of getting my novels almost all the way through the whole traditional publishing transom, only to have them shut down by marketing and publicity because I didn't have the dread word platform. So that little essay that I wrote with the book being completed, and one of the best agents in New York saying, "I love your work. You're one of my best clients in terms of your writing, but I can't get you published, so I'm not going to send this out." That was a bad day. So in that moment, when I got off the phone after I finished weeping, I wrote the short version of it, sent it to Modern Love. I'd been rejected for Modern Love many times, and they took it. And so then the Monday after it came out, it came out on Sunday, and then the next day, my agent sent the book out, and suddenly I had a book deal. This is good news for everybody. I had a book offer from 2 different publishers underneath the Penguin Random House umbrella, one from Riverhead Press and one Amy Einhorn at Putnam. And the editor from Riverhead was the editor of The Kite Runner, and Amy was the editor of The Help. So I went from being a beggar to a chooser, and really, it doesn't make any sense. Like, again, like there really there's no recipe for this. And I think my story is a good one, because the only reason why that book was even published, outside of the fact that hopefully it was well written, but from the business side of it, the only reason it was published was because of the huge response from that Modern Love essay. So go figure, right?
I love that story.
And you gotta love the process.
I love that story. And I want to encourage the gals in this mastermind, and also anyone else who's watching later, that there are lots of interesting creative ways to get your message out there and be picked up by a publisher. And that whole thing about being brave, even after you've been rejected 100 times, and do the 101th submission for your essay in an online or big magazine or newspaper, or getting more publicity for you and your message and your book. And it's going to be a tiring process some days. There are going to be those bad days, you know. Okay, so I want to make sure that we get this one basic question asked of you, because I think you are a perfect person to answer it. The women, they're all happen to be all women in this particular workshop, who are writing sometimes their very first book. Almost all of them are, I believe, except for one. What's your best advice for those beginning book writers? Do you have one piece of best advice? I know you have like a billion pieces of best advice, but what's the best one on the top of the list?
Well, the one that comes to mind is to stockpile your material before you start sending it out. And that goes with blogs, that goes with short stories, poems, books. I believe at least write many versions of that book, and make sure you really have done your very best before you even think of sending it to publishers or agents. Because,
what do you mean by stockpile?
I mean those 22 books sitting on the other side of that wall.
Yeah.
I didn't send out all of those books. I think I've sent out like 4 of them. You know, so I would get to the end of the book and I'd realize, you know, maybe this was an exercise in learning, you know? So it's like, are those books that aren't published a waste of my time? Heck no. Those books brought me to my craft. So the intersection, to sit at that intersection of heart and craft and mind that is writing, that's the focus for now. Get those books in great shape. Do not do it alone. Yes, writing is done alone, but you're so smart to be in a group. That's why I started Haven, because I did do it alone for years and years because I was too scared. And I said I was too stubborn, but I was too scared to trust other people. And you want to make sure that you're working with somebody who can really give you good feedback, you know, because just because somebody says, oh, I want to read your book, I love to read, or I'm also a writer, doesn't mean that they necessarily know how to give good feedback. So you really want to make sure you have some strong beta readers that you can trust. So I think that's probably the number one thing. Just make sure the book is right, is in not perfect, but in the best shape you possibly can get it in. And know that if you want traditional publishing, you need an agent, and an agent doesn't make a dime until they get you a book deal. So in this current market, and I don't want to depress you all, I'd much rather talk about process, but I will say that publishers less and less are getting to actually honor the editing process in-house. And often it's the editors who are now having to think about marketing, and agents are now sort of becoming more editors, and many of them are not equipped to be editors. So many books that you see out there, that writer has invested money in hiring a developmental editor, or doing something like Haven. So know that it's a process, and you got to be signed up for the process and love it.
Yes, and that's actually one of the questions that was left for you specifically, and for some of our, other guest experts is the gals want to know, how do you find a really good editor? How do you know they're good? How do you start that process? And just for the purposes of the 10 weeks that the ladies are going to be with me writing their books, I'm the cheerleader, I'm the inspirer, I'm the fire starter. I'm going to take them through all the processes that I know, but I hired a professional editor for my own book, and I know that it's important. So what would you say about that piece?
Well, it's just one person. So again, the reason why I started Haven is that I'm teaching people how to edit, really, by teaching people what to listen for and where to find that which is unique and surprising and essential about each writer's voice. And that's why people have such a powerful experience, because they're actually being trained in what to listen for. And so then by doing the writing that we do, you all write the guidebook from which I teach and from which you all learn. But structure is the hardest thing. So that's the first thing. It's like, make sure that whoever you're working with really knows what they're doing. How do you know if they know what they're doing? Well, they give you a lot of structural comments. They can see your book. It's almost an intuitive ability. Actually, it is an intuitive ability to be a good editor. And just because you know your way around the English language doesn't mean that you can actually, this sounds a little woo-woo, but feel and see somebody's book. I have that ability. I was so lucky to work with Amy Einhorn, who was the editor of The Help. And in fact, she told Catherine Stockett, who wrote The Help, to come to Haven because she said I was the best editor that she had worked with, who's also a writer, which means that it is that ability to put your finger on the pulse of really what's behind people's words. And I'm quoting myself right now, but what's behind their words, what's in between them, and then what's left in their wake. So that's kind of the big picture. Now, specifically what you're looking for is somebody who can really help you with structure. That is the number one difficulty for all writers. And everybody does it differently. So big question, do you follow an outline or do you write it more intuitively? I have different methods depending on which genre I'm writing in. For fiction, I usually begin with some sort of quirk of humanity or something that I'm really fascinated by, or something that maddens me or delights me, something that is a theme that kind of keeps me up at night. And then from that theme, I come up with a central question that spawns from that theme, because the central question then begs for an answer. And then from that central question, I'll think about who would dwell in that question. And from there, I find my characters. And then before I even write anything, I do intensive characterizations. So I ask myself questions. This is for nonfiction. I mean, for fiction, then I'll skip to nonfiction quickly because I know most of the people in your group are writing nonfiction. But you can do this for nonfiction too. I have a little cheat sheet here. I ask myself, what do they love? What do my characters love? So if it's nonfiction, that would be me. What is their dream? What's in the way of them getting their dream? What do they fear? What's their biggest conflict? And what are the stakes if they don't resolve their conflict? So again, what do they love? What is their dream? What's in the way of them getting their dream? What do they fear? This is really important. What's their biggest conflict? Of course, all of the above, really, probably you've already answered it, but what to really isolate their central conflict, and then what are the stakes if they don't resolve their conflict? So once I get into the characterization, then so it's like the theme begets the central question, which beget the characters, which then beget the place, and then we get into the bones of the book, the narrative. With nonfiction, because you've already lived it for the most part, although some people are writing their way through things, and I have sort of a different recipe, if you will. There really is no recipe, but structure for that. That's actually what I did. I wrote my way through a difficult time in my marriage. The occupational hazard there is that by the end of the book, at the end of your life experience, there's no book, right? Like Liz Gilbert wrote her way through Eating and Praying and Loving. I wrote my way through a difficult time in my marriage. Cheryl Strayed, on the other hand, wrote Wild years after she experienced that trek. So there are two different ways to do it. If you're writing about something that's already happened, what I always do is I build it scene to theme instead of theme to scene. So I pick the primary scenes that I feel are defining scenes or inciting incidents that happened during that period in my life. And generally with nonfiction, you don't want to write a linear book. And that's where people get confused, because what happens is that something happens to them that they feel is so important, and it is important to you, but it's not necessarily important to us unless you can bring us into your world. So if you begin with what are the stakes here, and you ask yourself those questions, then you can start choosing the scenes that you want to use, and you can decide whether or not you want to develop what's called a parallel narrative, where you have the current you telling a backstory, there's the parallel, and you dip back and forth, or whether you actually do want to write a linear story. If you do that, the most important thing to think of in terms of structures, what's the container? What's the container for that time? So for instance, if that marital crisis of mine had lasted 6 years, it wouldn't have been a book. But life delivered me a memoir in that it was a 6-month period of my life, right? So if at the end of Eat, Pray, Love, Liz didn't end up learning anything about eating or praying or loving, there wouldn't have been a book there. But I also think that if you're writing your way through something, it informs how you live. Just know that truly you have to love the process and treat the writing as if it's a lifeline, because at the end there might not be a book. So those are just some structural comments. And that's what you're looking for in an editor. So you can ask them, how do you see the structure of this book? And what do you think the theme is, right? You're not a beggar, you're a chooser. If you're working with an editor, you're paying them, unless you're being edited in-house. But it's still the same thing. You want to make sure that they're your emotional, intellectual, where applicable, spiritual match, and that they would be a reader of your book.
That's perfect. I was hoping that you were going to say those last few words. Like, would they be your ideal reader? And you know what? Your fiction recipe actually were all of the same things I would ask myself about my ideal client in my business even. So know this, you guys, all those things that she said, the dream, the fear, all of those things, it's the same as we're, thinking about what we're doing in the world and who is actually going to be consuming what we offer. So same for the book. So I actually thought that whole thing you read goes for nonfiction and fiction.
Yeah. For your agent and for anybody representing you at all in marketing, and for your writing group, your ultimate editor, and you're looking for your match.
Yeah, I love it. I love that, because that makes it very clear to and it's so funny you said this might be a little woo. Do you realize who you're talking to, this particular group of women? Like, you are in such good company with that, with the woo factor. But yeah, that helps them have some clarity about who it is that they're going to ask to be on their team as they write this book.
Yeah. You don't have to do it alone, nor should you.
So, Jennifer, before you have to go, let me let you come chime in now and ask Laura any question you have. I'll have you unmute yourself.
Okay. My two biggest questions, and the first one is, I've already noticed that the publisher that I'm working with, that I've signed with, has a little bit different idea for the book than I do myself. So how do you handle that without it being like overly confrontational?
Well, it's right. That's like playground politics. That goes back to the sandbox, doesn't it? Well, first of all, congratulations, Jennifer, because that is no small feat, getting published. And I think hybrids are really great. Yeah, you have to pay. But they can get you in, I'm not sure if your press is able to do this, but some of the other ones I know can get you right into bookstores and brick and mortar bookstores, and can really treat you as if you're being traditionally published by a big New York publisher. In terms of having that conversation, I mean, there's a little bit of fear, isn't there? Because it's like, this is kind of this, like, I got my dream, I don't want to screw it up. But again, like, I don't know if you're a mother, but let's say you're a mother and your kid was sick. Wouldn't you do anything you needed to do to get the very best care for that child of yours? Wouldn't you ask that doctor, even if it was at Mayo and it was really hard to get in with him or her, wouldn't you still put that doctor's feet to the fire and make sure that it's the very best care for your child? Well, it's the same for your book. You're the author of it. And so you have to make sure that that editor, okay, so understands you. Conversely, often we're so used to our book because we've been writing it for sometimes years, and we've memorized it like a song. And just because we've memorized that song and it sounds harmonious to us, it might not actually be full of harmony. It might have some dissonance in there. And a fresh take on it with a good editor might be exactly what the book needs. So here's just a little personal example, and then I know you've got to catch a plane. So in the 9th draft of the novel that's being published in 2020, in the 9th draft, and I wrote it like once upon a time, twice. So from scratch twice, and then it was from the second version that I edited. So by the 9th draft, and there are 4 women protagonists. So, I mean, these women lived in my head so much that I actually took a photograph one day and thought, oh, I'm going to text this to the women. And then I was like, oh, my God, they don't exist. Like, that's how much I was living and breathing these women.
Whoa.
And so, yeah, I know that's that's a little freaky. But these women so occupied my life that I believed in everything that they had to say on the page. And I gave the book to an editor friend and said, I feel like there's something wrong with this, but I can't see it and I'm not sure. But, before I send it off to my agent, I just want one more look. Well, she isolated a major problem in the book and she took 90 pages out of it.
Ooh.
Yeah. Out of a 350 page book, let's say, or 375, she took 90 pages out of it. And it was like she had freed it, like Michelangelo believed that it was his job to free the sculpture from the stone. Like
Yes.
She freed it in a way that I didn't necessarily know it needed to be liberated. And then because of that, I was able to go back in and write an additional 50 that really made the book what it is and why my agent was able to sell it. So 2 sides of the same coin, which is you want to get the book out there and you want it to build that bridge to the reader, but sometimes it takes another eye on it, a good eye. And so just know that. And, courage, you can do it.
Anything else, Jennifer?
My other question, and I don't know if this is your specialty or not, but I really want to reach out to some experts in the field and really big name people. Like one of them that I want to talk to is Dr. Gabor Mate, for example, and Rick Dobbins, the founder of MAPS, and try to get in touch with some people in the both Canadian and American FDAs. And so do you have any advice on how to approach people for interviews when nobody's ever heard of me and I'm just a local yokel from Columbus, Ohio, reaching out to these big name famous people?
I went to college outside of Columbus, Ohio in Granville, by the way.
Denison?
Yep. That's where I realized that I was a writer and not a filmmaker, on that hill in Granville. You know who is really good at this is Laura DeFranco. You know her? Woman's got girl, what? She, who knows? You just have to ask. A long time ago, I had an editor say to me, I was, at one of those writing conferences and you have that mild panic the whole time because it's like, I need to network, I need to meet the agent, I need to meet the editor, I need to meet important people, and I've spent money and time doing this thing. And I would be that, that young writer in the front row, and the minute the speaker would be done, I just jump right up and harass her. Usually it was her. And, meanwhile, most of these people are introverts and they've just given a speech, so they're all kind of flushed and frazzled, and it's like, I hated that feeling. And I apologized to this one woman, and she looked at me and she said, you have to ask. That's it. Because if you don't ask, just like if you didn't submit your book, right? It's not going to happen. So you just go for it. You go for the big experts. I mean, obviously it's helpful if it's the friend of a friend kind of thing. But I don't know. I did something pretty gutsy, I think. Dr. Christian Northrup. So I thought that she would really love my memoir because it shows a woman using writing as a lifeline during a difficult time. I mean, really, that book is for writers because I say writing is my practice, my prayer, my meditation, my way of life, and sometimes my way to life. And that's what it was during the time depicted in that book. But I really felt that because she talks about, I think it's called proprioceptive writing. She had taken a writing course, and she believes that writing should be in the wellness world. And one of my quotes is, I think that writing should be up there with diet and exercise in the realm of preventative wellness. And so I wanted her to read the book and perhaps offer a blurb. And I just sent it to her. Like without my editor doing it. And it was kind of, usually the editor should do it. But I just sent it to her, and she read it, and she contacted me, and she ended up blurbing it. And that blurb's on the cover of the paperback. And I think it was like a year after the hardback came out that I contacted her. And I've been on her Hay House radio show 3 times. And it was just because you have to ask. I wish I was more specific than that. I mean, of course, what I also did is I wrote a spreadsheet before my book came out per Malcolm Gladwell's Tipping Point. And I listed all the people who were kind of my mavens. They're not like social climbers. They're connectors. The people who will really take a stand for you when that book comes out, throw you a party at their club or in their home or with their book group. In any kind of author series that they might attend or be a part of. I just made a list of all the people who I knew would be at my table. And then I started to ask them. That felt more comfortable because then they could ask, right? They like to connect. And it's a special thing that they have a friend that's a writer that's got a book coming out, right? Like it's fun for them too. So find your connectors and then let them ask for you. That's another way.
Okay, fantastic.
I love that answer, Jennifer. That specific last piece of her answer is make your list. It's going to be so important. And don't be afraid to ask. I know you are not afraid to ask. And sometimes the bigger influencers, you can research the email addresses and reach out to the people. If you can even figure out who the first line of defense is there and email them and just start to just keep and expect all the rejection and just say next and keep it going and keep up the momentum. And I'll offer one more piece of advice because being at Laura's Haven retreat was part of this advice. Go do things. Go meet people in person. Go to those speeches and be the one like she was to be at the stage and shake the hand, and go to some writers' conferences. And so sometimes you have to make some small investments in yourself so that you personally meet the people you want to be on that list of the table people. And in the last year, I've made a huge effort to get my butt out of the house, out from behind this writing computer, and like actually meet people. And Laura has been that for me, like ever since I met her. So do that for yourself too. And you're going to start to make a list that becomes this inner circle that really, really helps you that way. Anything else about that, Laura?
Well, it's funny. So much of this is congruent with this idea of finding your tribe. It's like, you don't waste your time going to a writing conference that already gives you kind of that icky feeling. Like those
totally
aren't people, like don't go all the way to LA to some writing conference that's full of experts that aren't right, that aren't consistent with what your message of your book is or how you show up in the world. So, be conscious of that, your precious time and money. And I'm very dedicated at Haven to trying to create network. We have, Laura, do you know we have almost 700 alums now?
Yay!
They're not all on the private internet page because I didn't start it until like 2 years in. But, there's some incredible networking just through the whole Haven network too. So there's a little plug for Haven.
Yes, definitely. That's part of what the benefit is. And I meant to say earlier that, so we have to go to Haven 1 to be able to go to Haven 2, right?
Yes.
Okay.
There's never any pressure to do any of the other programs.
Right.
With high demand. I now have 6 different programs.
Okay. So I was going to talk about the Haven 2. So I just want to make sure I had my story straight before I started to like plug Haven 2, you know. For book writers, I saw Haven 1 as a necessary step anyway. So I'm not even saying anything about that. Like, it was so necessary for me to go through that process and then arrive at Haven 2. And even when you arrive at Haven 2, still uncertain and you have got your book there and it's like, oh my gosh. And then I left there knowing I had to rewrite the book. And so I said a couple of really interesting words to myself on the plane on the ride home from that. I'm like, yeah. So now I got to sit and I have to be with all this amazing feedback you gave me. But it got me so excited to go sit down at my computer and rewrite that whole fucking book, because I knew that what you told me was going to breathe life into it in a way that people were going to read it and actually love it. And that is what has happened since that latest book of mine has been released. I can't even thank you enough for teaching me what you taught me about scenes. Yeah. And about dialogue and like getting my reader to be the fly on the wall. And they got to have that really, really intimate, connection with me because I was writing it in the way that you taught me to write it. So anyway, that's what I wanted to say about Haven 2 before we got onto another topic. But yeah. So,
well, something you just said, I think would be of great value to your group, which is we live our life in scenes, not themes, right? And so many of us will start to write a memoir, and what we do naturally, and we're sort of taught this, like in writing essays in college and high school, we report everything that has happened, and we try to, have a great command of the English language, but you can use big words and twist a plot and turn a phrase all you want. But if you don't have the commitment to truly showing what that experience was like for you, real or imagined, because even when we're writing fiction, I still believe we're mining our lives and what we know. If you're not committed to truly showing it, and if you're going to, like the old adage, show versus tell, if you're going to tell it or report it, it will never create that bridge to the reader. And if you are particularly adept at using the English language and playing with words on the page, the reader's going to be confused about why they're not connecting with your material. So that's why when I teach at Haven 1 and 2, I'm always focused on the power of the scene and removing that reporter voice from the way you depict it so that you can make that bridge.
So thank you for that. Jennifer, thank you for being with us for the time that you were. Have a good rest of your day, my dear. See you later.
Good luck with that book.
Okay, so super awesome. So, with maybe 10 or 15 minutes left, tell us what you'd like to tell us about what is going on in the world for you right now, any programs you want to share. Just tell us what you want to tell us.
Well, thanks, Laura.
Yeah.
And thanks for what you said about Haven. It's always a pleasure having you in any of my programs because you're so passionate about the process. Some people, that's why I like to get people at the beginning of their process, whether it is their writing process or the process of writing any kind of project, short form or long form. I don't want, like sometimes people will say, oh, I need to go take a writing class or a workshop in preparation for Haven. And I always say, no, come to Haven first, because Haven is the preparation. It sets you up for everything that you need, including community and networking and other programs and mentorship. And I now do consulting for people who are doing Haven before Haven even, and then afterward as well. So I want people to come and when their material is raw, when their writing practice is raw, so that I can set you up for the feeling of the passion that you have, but also the completion. I don't like the word success by society's standards, but that feeling of wholeness and completion with your process and your projects. So so somebody like you who comes and says, okay, good, I got down 30 pages plus. I think you had more than 30 pages when you came to Haven 2. And now, we sort of like turned it inside out and restructured it. And that's what it takes. It really does take that. So nothing is more frustrating to me than getting somebody who comes to Haven who has spent, in some cases like $30,000 or $40,000 working with an editor that wasn't a good match for them, or getting an MFA program that didn't end up teaching them what it promised, although I am pro academia. It's just that it breaks my heart to have to help chisel people out of the woe that might have happened for them during another sort of program, and especially if they've dumped a lot of money into it. So that's a big thing. Get the support you need from the beginning, and make sure it's a good match for you. So what I'm up to now is, I'm about to launch an online course, which
Yay.
is a lot of fun to, it was challenging though, because it's not the Haven experience. I'm not like hands-on. So I'm just like staring at a computer screen like this, but without a pretty other Laura on the other side staring into a camera. But I hope that it's helpful for people. And so that's going to be launched probably in early springtime. So that's a 5-module master class, 1 hour each, that has instruction and writing. And then there's a mini course that's a 3-module course that's 20-minute classes each, and same thing, writing time and instruction. And there'll be like a free downloadable thing and all that. And then I've got my 2019 calendar to fill. March is full, and then I have one in May and
Haven 1.
These are Haven 1s, yeah.
Okay.
And then 2 in June, 2 in September, and 1 in October.
And what's your website, please?
It is lauramunson.com.
Okay.
And there's a Haven tab on there. Let's see, what else is, I'm going to Morocco. I'm
Yay.
a group, actually 6 out of the 7 of them are Haven alums, which is this is 5 out of the 7 are Haven alums. 3 of whom did Haven 2 as well. But Haven 1, I want people to know that Haven 1 is a standalone program. It's not like one of these kind of, but wait, there's more. It's just that people wanted more, and I had to figure out how I could continue to support people and still have my own writing time. So Haven 1, as you will recall, has a 4-hour class in the morning and a 3-hour class in the evening. And so it's a writing workshop and a retreat in one. And I offer editing services only to people who do Haven 1 or Haven 2. So, and so a lot of people come to Haven 1 who are working on a book, and they do one of my editorial packages, and then I put them in on the first day so that they can do with their one-on-ones with me. So we can focus on it, and then have a map for how they're going to spend their afternoon free time during Haven writing, and then I can support them afterwards as well. So a lot of people come and do Haven 1 for a book, but there are also people who come who have no interest in ever being published too. And I love that about the retreat, because there's just zero competition, as you remember it. And it's also something else that's important for you all, is that when you're looking for an editor, a writing group, agent, publisher, all of that, you also want to make sure that those people are not about themselves, that they're for you. That's their job, to be for you. So Haven is not about me, it's about the program. And so the program holds you, like there's my little Haven nest, it holds you. I hold the program, and then the people who run the ranch, and it's at this beautiful ranch on a square mile of land looking straight into Glacier National Park. And those people that host the retreat hold me. So it's a very healthy group environment, because we all know some groups aren't healthy. And these groups, they always say, we're your best group, right? Like, it can't always be like this, but it is always like that, because I think the language on my website reflects what Haven really is. And I also am the real deal. I walk the walk. So I understand from the point of view of being a writer just how hard it is to get the support and to trust that the support will be there for you. So that's what's going on for me. I lead retreats throughout the year in Montana, and then I'm doing one a year, maybe two. My new program, Haven Wander, which brings me to different exotic places in the world, and we use writing to help us navigate this beautiful and heartbreaking thing called life. So it's really not necessarily for writers at all, but we do use this really cool method that I put together. And the first one is this February in Morocco. It's sold out, and I can't wait.
Oh my gosh, that sounds so awesome. Do you have a second one planned yet for 2019?
No, but I am speaking with a Haven alum from New Zealand right now, thinking I might do one in New Zealand. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's bucket list territory for me for sure. Wow. That's fantastic. Okay, you guys, lauramunson.com. Okay. And that will be up under this video wherever you guys are watching it anyway later. So if you're looking for that. So, oh my gosh. Okay. How are we going to wrap today's interview up? Like, what would be the thing that you'd like to leave these first time book writers with? What thought would be good?
Well, let's just begin. Let's end with what we started with, which is heart language, right?
Yes.
I mean, nobody asks us to do this thing called book writing or writing at all. In fact, it's very inconvenient for many of our loved ones to even think that we would be writing, especially if we're writing a memoir. And so know that no one's going to probably champion you the way that you long to be championed, even the people who love you the most, like your family or friends. That's why finding your writing tribe is so important. And these are people who might not even be in your daily lives, or people that you might not ever befriend in your normal life. So this is important. It's like, hold it dear, hold it close, treat it like your baby and your book baby, your writing process baby. And the last thing I will say is that inner critic that we all have, and I used to think that I could shake her, and in the memoir I wrote, I actually name her because I needed to become aware of just how cruel she was to me in my own mind. But after I wrote the book, I realized I don't think I'm ever going to really get rid of her. And so to treat her like she's the enemy isn't probably the best solution. Instead, I look at her, and I say this at Haven, like a scared little girl who knows exactly what to say to break my heart. And so at Haven, I tell everybody, let's just put her down for a nap. Like, put her down for a nap. And so the idea of, and in fact, I've become really playful with her. I feel like I've loved her into submission, and I've created like this inner kind of, I think what you are for these women is like an inner champion. But, you know, she's becoming kinder to me, you know, but I don't think I'm ever going to really shake her. So I now call her the inner critter instead of the inner critic. And just know she's scared, with a megaphone right to your heart. And just before you write, put her down for a nap, and you get to play, right? So think about the playfulness of writing, even if you're writing about difficult subjects. It allow, you know, the third grader, the second grader, the kindergartner in you knows exactly how to get those words out from your deepest place onto the page. So trust that, and know that you're worthy. Even if the world doesn't hold you up, and if you don't get that book deal of your dreams, if you never become a New York Times bestselling author, etc., just know that what you're doing, the process of what you're doing, is so courageous, and you are enough, and you are worthy of having your wildest dreams come true. Let your wildest dream, however, be the actual doing of it. And then you'll feel that connection to your work, and it will make your work even more powerful.
Oh my gosh, you're so amazing. That was so perfect to finish with. I love you so much. Thank you so much for coming. I loved every word. I actually quoted you on something. You'll find that on a poster on Facebook later. I have
good at that. You guys should all model what Laura does, because she is tireless.
I am. I'm trying to make the best go of it that I can. Thank you very, very much. You guys, lauramunson.com, go find out about Haven and get all the information about her retreats in 2019 and her programs and workshops. I can't wait to see your online stuff, seriously. That's going to be really fun. So thank you.
The book comes out in 1 year, January 2020. So there'll be lots of information about that too. And then all the usual Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, blah, blah, blah. But I am really active on all three of those. So
all with your name.
Yep,
right?
Laura Munson.
Yeah, okay, all the tag. Okay, awesome.
Laura Munson author, I think, on Facebook, but Laura Munson, actually, I think it's Laura Munson author on Instagram too, and then Laura Munson on Twitter. I'm mostly active on Facebook on my author page, my personal page, not as much, and Instagram is kind of my new thing because I'm very visual too, as we all probably are who are writers. So anyway, thank you for having me, Laura, and thank you for putting together this series. I know it's going to help your group and other people who get to see it too.
Definitely.
I'm a fan.
Thanks. All right, you guys, until the next one, we'll see you soon.